Hello, beautiful readers. Today is November 13th, and I have finished reading The Piano Teacher by Janice Y.K. Lee. This book is set in Hong Kong, both during World War II and 10 years after the war, so it's a bit of a history novel. And we start off with a gal named Claire Pembleton, who is is just moved to Hong Kong and ends up taking a job teaching piano to a pair of Chinese people's daughter. So that's where the title comes from, but that's about it. There's not a whole lot more to the title being connected to the book, because then we immediately jump in to hearing about Will Truesdale, the driver for the family, and how he came to Hong Kong back in 1941 and was immediately snapped up by this gal named Trudy. And it really, most of the book revolves around their love story and about how they met and were dating, and how her dad um, kind of took him and took care of them together. And then they were invaded. The Hong Kong was invaded by the Japanese and overtaken. And so there's this wonderful story of what happened during World War II between Will and Trudy and the rest of the people, and how some of them were really nice and some of them turned really nasty, and all of these kind of things. So that part of the story was really fascinating. I loved seeing what happened, because I had no idea Hong Kong had been taken during World War II and then released after the war. So it's from a historical perspective, it's really interesting, and I love to see that portion of it. However, from a story perspective, the the love affair with Claire is not with her husband. It's with that same fellow, Will. So you can guess what happens to Trudy, probably. But Will and Claire end up in this weird, like, standoffish, not really emotional affair, but very physical, and I just, I just didn't like the way that was all happening. Um, but the biggest issue I had was that there was two storylines and they were running parallel, but it didn't like really start coming together and explaining things until the end. You had to get about 3/4 of the way through the book before you started seeing some of, like, there'd been hints dropped. She did an okay job with some of that, but it took so long for me to get to the point where things were interweaving to understand why there was the parallel structure, that I would have put the book down a long time before I even got to that, if it hadn't been a book club book. I mean, I was just like, okay, what's the point? This is stupid. So I don't really recommend it that much. If you can deal with waiting until nearly the end of the book for things to come together and to make sense, uh, it's it can be a good book. I mean, it was fantastic ending, but it was everything in between the beginning and that point that I just, why am I reading this? And I think if I went back and reread it now that I know what was going on, I would probably pick up on some of those clues. But as a first time through kind of thing, and I don't really like books that you have to read at least twice through to understand what's going on. So I don't recommend it that much. It's a good place to pick up history if you want to do it in a novel form for what happened in Hong Kong during World War II, but other than that, I can't particularly recommend it. So, next up, I decided not to read the next Fire and Ice trilogy or series book, and I'm instead going to be jumping back to the Bitter Blue, or no, Fire, another one in Kristen Cashor's series. So, if you have any other questions, recommendations, put them below, and I hope you all have a fantastic day and keep reading.